Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown.
I'm Mark.
And this is Gordon, and we love talking about baseball.
Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown, and today we kind of want to go over a little, not necessarily a different part of the game, but one of the consequences of the game. And it kind of started with last season on July 4th. Pitcher Masahiro Tanaka was hit during in batting practice with a line drive from Giancarlo Stanton. He's only the latest in a pretty long history of different pitchers being hit in the head or face with batted balls. The most severe injury that kind of ever resulted from this was actually a pitcher back in 1920, Ray Chapman, was actually killed after being hit in the head with a baseball. Now, it's unusual that was obviously an outlier incident, but the MLB is aware of the risk to pitchers and some of the lack of interest on the MLB pitcher's part in putting on any kind of protective headgear. So we kind of wanted to come in today to talk about what's it going to take to get the MLB to do something about the ongoing risk of a serious injury to a pitcher due to a batted baseball. Traditionally, pitchers don't like to wear the protective padding on their caps. I certainly didn't when I was pitching, but is that ever going to change? We can recall a couple of years ago that Alex Torres for the Mets was actually wearing a prototype cap that had protection on the cap, and that was something that he was wearing. So it's kind of interesting just to think about how technology and the rules of the game might change in order to avoid a situation like this.
And so we're fortunate today because the podcast is going to have its first guest ever. There can only be one first. And we're really happy and proud to have Willie Blair, most recently of the Detroit Tigers at the end of his career, join us on the podcast today to talk about that subject, his experience, what happened on May 5th, 97, and what might happen going forward. So, Willie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So I noticed in your MLB back career, you had 8 major league teams you pitched for, which, people pitch for lots of MLB teams, but that even surprised me a little bit. But what really stuck out was that you pitched for 2 expansion teams. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I tried to find and started looking around at players that play for 2 expansion teams. And I don't know if you consider that unlucky or lucky as a baseball player, but maybe you could just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it's certainly not common.
Well, I will say this. I felt like at the time it was a great experience, to be a part of history, to be on 2 expansion teams. Neither of the teams I was on was a really good team early on. I mean, you're basically bringing in a lot of young guys,
right.
A lot of guys from different organizations and that kind of thing. And sometimes it takes a little time to gel as a team. But, I made a lot of good friends on both those teams, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, we will continue to search to see if we can find anybody. I'm not sure if they're the only guy to do it, but at this point, you're the only one that we know of. So how about what you're doing right now? You're working the Tiger organization.
Yeah, I'm a pitching coach in the minor leagues. I'll be with our High A affiliate, which has changed this year. Prior to this year, our High A affiliate was in Lakeland, Florida, and our Low A affiliate was in West Michigan in Grand Rapids. So that's flip-flopped this year. So I will be in Grand Rapids with our High A affiliate as a pitching coach.
But the Tigers are still keeping their Low A.
Yeah, the Low A will be in, like I said, in Lakeland. Now, the way I understand it, all of the short season A's are the teams that are kind of been pushed out.
Oh, okay.
So it's not necessarily being nearer to the Tigers. It's not about bringing players because you're not bringing single A or players to the major leagues. And any particular reasoning that you can think of as to why they flipped it?
I think there's a lot of talk in the media and stuff like that about how they wanted to maybe have a little bit better geographical map for some of the leagues, and there's a number of other different reasons why they did it, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but I I know that's part of it.
Yeah. We talked about the big major changes for minor league baseball in one of our prior podcasts because it really is something that is affected a lot of people and a lot of players. So I'm sure you're really happy to get back out in the field because you didn't do that last year, right? You couldn't even have a season at the minor league level.
Yeah, that's a very odd feeling for somebody that's used to being out on the field in mid-February and being there till mid-September or later. So that was a very odd feeling not being able to do that. And, I feel bad for the players, but all the players are in the same boat. But I feel bad for them because they basically lost a year of competition. And, just another year added onto their career. And some of these guys needed that time to develop. And so that's the part I feel bad about is the kids really didn't have a chance to shine and move up the ladder, so to speak.
Well, I'm sure I can speak for Gordon. Say we just can't wait to watch and be part of baseball. I can only imagine what it would be like, from a coaching standpoint, because the void there, as you say, is just for something every year you've done in your whole life to stop completely. Must be weirder.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can even remember it. I stopped playing, early on into college, but it was like the year didn't start with New Year's when you were playing baseball. The year started when you went to spring training and you started baseball. So like to all of a sudden have that just chopped out and you don't have that anymore, it's just like it never happened almost.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is we did actually go to spring training, but we had to leave pretty quick. So I think some of the guys, I was actually there February 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there for a while. I think I came home on March 14th, maybe. So I was there for a little over a month, but some of the players had just gotten there. They'd only been in spring training for, a day or two. And when all this stuff came down, so it was a strange time in our careers and our lives. It was just a weird deal.
So we want to get to the topic we're talking about today, and this kind of started a little bit. Gordon and I talked in one of our prior episodes about Ray Chapman, who Gordon mentioned, who was actually a batter who was hit by a pitch ball in 1920.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong on that.
The only player to be struck and killed in a major league game. And went back and looked at, you would think that, hitters, have hit pitchers. And I think the most famous one that I remember growing up was Herb Score, who was a famous pitcher for the Indians Rookie of the Year in 1955. And his career was really, just stopped almost by that incident. It was never the same after that. And there are other players. But 40 years after that, actually, almost to the day, you had that experience while pitching a hell of a game. And you were able to come back from it. We want to talk a little bit about it and a little bit about what you thought before that, if it could happen, if it was possible, and then how you have handled it. And maybe you're tired of talking about it, but hopefully we can learn a little something.
Well, first of all, you mentioned Herb Score, and the game that I got hit in, we were actually playing Cleveland in Cleveland, and he was doing the game that day. And I remember watching. Weird. I remember watching the video afterwards and just watching his reaction. It was you could tell he was very concerned about it and that kind of thing. So I never talked to him after that, but I do know that he was pretty upset about what happened on the field that day. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, for him, that was almost the exact 40th year anniversary for it. So that had to be kind of surreal for him in a way.
Yeah. Well, it had to be. I mean, I remember after I got hit, there was a couple more instances in 98 even. I was with the Diamondbacks, and Kelly Stinnett hit a line drive and hit Billy Wagner in the head. That year. And I remember my feeling when, sitting in the dugout watching that happen. I was like, it almost made me sick to my stomach. But, it's a dangerous part of the game, no doubt about it. I always knew that could happen. I'd been hit multiple times before. I got hit in college. I got hit in the minor leagues, even in the big leagues. But it always seemed like you could either deflect it with your glove, or you could move your body in a way to where it hits you in muscle or hits you in a part of the body that, it's not going to kill you. So we always knew of the dangers of it. But that day was obviously a little bit different.
Well, and you weren't out very long, right?
What's that?
I said you weren't out very long either. That surprised me very much.
Yeah, I think I missed a month. They originally said that it might be 2 months if they had to wire my jaw shut and that kind of thing. And I talked them out of that for a couple of different reasons. One is I have allergies, and I also had a deviated septum in my nose, so I didn't breathe through my nose very well. So if I would have had my jaw shut, it would have been tough for me to really breathe. So I talked them out of that. And my argument was pretty easy because of the fact that the fracture was non-displaced. So as long as I promised them I would, be careful and that kind of thing, they were okay with it.
That certainly makes it a little bit different because, I was only ever hit with a batted ball once, and so I kind of got lucky. But even that, I remember afterwards, it's always kind of just lurking there in the back of your mind that it's like you knew it was a possibility beforehand, but once you've been hit once, it's like, okay, no, that's a real thing that can definitely happen. It's like you're like, it'll never happen to me before that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I never thought it could happen, but in the heat of competition, it's definitely on the back burner. You're not really thinking. Your job is to get that hitter out and help your team win games and all that. So you can't go out there and be scared. So I don't know. Athletes just have a way of putting the fear or threat of injury. They put that on the back burner. That's we love competing. That's part of our job. We just go out and do it, and it's part of the game. We all know that, but it's somewhere on the back burner, the back of our mind somewhere, or whatever.
Well, talk a little bit about you when we talked to you when we talked before the show about the fact that you coached Alex Torres and your thought about protective headgear and what's it going to take. And that's kind of where we started this whole thing is we don't want something really bad to happen. And at some point it just seems, I don't say inevitable, that's possible. So how does it get changed from where it is now? Hockey goalies didn't used to wear masks. Then they did. They wore helmets. So, when safety protocols become more, understood, people make changes. It takes time. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I have a lot of respect for Alex Torres and what he did that year. It took a lot of courage to wear something that's, completely different. As you mentioned earlier, players are kind of reluctant to make changes. For one, it feels weird. If you're pitching or playing, you want to feel comfortable. So that feels weird. It looks weird. People make comments all the time to Alex of it, but he stuck to his guns and he wore that all year. And so I really admire him for that. As far as, what's going to happen or what needs to happen, my view might be a little bit different than other people, but I was directly affected by this. And so, I do feel like there should be a move, sometime soon to do something to protect the pitcher. Do I have the answer on what that should be? I don't. It has to be something that's like I said, it has to be comfortable. It has to look decent. It can't look like you're, completely different than the other players. I don't know what that answer is, but I think it probably needs to start at the lower levels and just go from there. And then as over a period of time, it just becomes an accepted piece of equipment or accepted practice. But the main thing, and I want to be clear on this, it has to be something that, that is comfortable. You have to, it can't hinder your view. It can't hinder your movements. I'm not smart enough to come up with what that's going to be. But I do think that there's a lot of smart people out there that can come up with something.
And yeah, I think that point is really key because we know. I mean, I was a pitcher, and it's just like if there's any change, if it's at all different, they're going to find a way to blame what has changed for any kind of drop in performance, even if it is or isn't directly impacting that. I know it would feel really disconcerting if all of a sudden you're wearing a hat on the field that it weighs just a little bit more. You're going to feel off, and it's going to take an adjustment period. So I think that's why your point that like you need to start off with the younger kids and get them used to throwing that way their whole lives. Then it won't be an issue. But to take some guy like Jacob deGrom, who's been pitching now for years, or Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer, and be like, hey, so the way you're used to it, totally different now. Wear this new thing. They're going to push back on it just because they've been fine up until now, and they don't like how it feels.
Of course, and I would have too. That's I think that's just part of us as an athlete. We get so used to doing things a certain way, and we're reluctant to change certain things. So I agree. It would be tough to do just to institute it at the higher levels. That's why I feel like it needs to be, it needs to start in the low levels, youth leagues, and have these guys get used to this all the way up through their amateur days, all the way up into pro ball. So, whether that ever happens, I don't know. I do think it would be a good thing for the game. Protect some people, because it's only a matter of time. Somebody's going to get hurt badly, and you hate to look back at something like that and say, well, it took this in order for us to make a change.
And if I'm a player, you hate to kind of think this strategically about it, but you're going to have a lot more control over what the proposed solution is if you approach it now than after that incident. Because if you have that incident, the level of control you'll have over what the solution is going to drop way down, because it's going to be more important at that point on how to just fix the problem permanently, rather than if like, okay, what is our preemptive measure? You might not get as like wild a solution for something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really don't know a whole lot about how all that stuff kind of works, but I think it would definitely be better to approach it before something major happened rather than later, for sure.
Willie, you played, I think, at the same time that John Olerud played. There was certainly overlap in your careers, and
played together actually.
Oh, that's right.
You did.
So he wore a batting helmet on the field, which was, I don't know if anybody else did at the time. Do you remember?
I don't remember anybody wearing one at the time, to be honest with you. But I was very fortunate. I got to play with John Olerud in Toronto as well as New York. I was only in New York for a couple of months, but what a great human being. And his story was amazing, that he was able to recover and come back from what he had.
Yeah.
And there's a guy that definitely would have been much more appreciated into the way we look at the game today than he was back then, because he wasn't a big power guy back when and that's what we expected out of first baseman. But today people would be like, wait, you're going to be a first baseman that plays great defense and hits 330? Sign me up.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mentioned hockey before. We talked about hockey, and the way that hockey did it was they started at the youth levels, right? So they didn't I remember the NHL had a few guys on the ice with helmets, but most of them were not wearing helmets, in the 60s and into the 70s even. And so it has to happen incrementally. And Little League Baseball would be a place to start that. And the technology is so much better than it was, even 10 years ago. Yes, there's an expense. So it probably comes down to money to agree, right? All these youth leagues, now you got to have the pitcher wear this thing, and it probably won't be very good at the very low levels, but at least the kids will get used to it. And it would be better, as everybody's agreeing, if MLB was behind this and say, let's help Little League Baseball. Maybe we give them some money, to do this. How about that?
Well, I'm not one to spend somebody else's money, but obviously that would be great to, basically just institute this at the lower levels. Maybe give them a little money to help come up with a design, or even to supply, youth baseball with those things, because ultimately, the more it's used at the lower levels and the more data that you get, you can improve this thing as it goes forward. And hopefully by the, several years down the road, you can have a product that big league players would be willing to wear.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start now, right? Because it could take 20 years before
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely.
So, all right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us on the program, on the podcast. Like I said, our first guest will always be grateful to you for getting us started, and hopefully, we'll get a chance to talk to you in the future. Thanks again for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back some other time.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, Willie.
So, we finished speaking up with Willie, but we just kind of wanted to take some time to kind of take a look at the historical perspective of it, kind of just run through a large number of the incidents that have occurred, because there's a lot of interesting history here. And you'd be surprised, because one of the things that kind of jumped out to me is how it's seemingly become more common as time has passed on, with a lot of the incidents happening rather recently, it feels like.
I was tracking them, and I had forgotten about the Kelly Stinnett hitting Billy Wagner, two other former Mets, by the way, and how that was we started after that with Bryce Flory, and I do remember that, and who got hit, and so Willie's injury, I think we didn't really want to talk about it with him on the air too much, about the fact that if it had happened like a quarter of an inch different or an inch different, and it could have been fatal. It was really that close, and you don't really want to talk about a brush like that, because it's discomforting.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a bad one. That was definitely like one of the things that also makes it tough is Willie's was definitely one of the more difficult incidents. He was down for like 5 minutes, I think, in that. And it was a scary moment.
Off the bat of Julio Franco, 107 miles an hour exit velocity. So
yeah, the great part about this is the only joke I want to make is that, we had Julio Franco back in 1997. He might have still been 50 at that point.
That's true. And I had no idea, by the way, that Willie had played with Olerud, and I should have remembered that. That
he played with him twice, but with the Blue Jays and the Mets,
2 different places. So the general manager now, another former Met and a former Royal, is the newest general manager of the Texas Rangers, Chris Young, and in 2008 he got hit in the head by Pujols. A liner right back up the middle, bloodied his nose, fractured his skull, and then he ended up pitching for another 8 years.
He pitched for a large number of years past that.
So it happens. The point is way too often. I think that's what we
that's the wild thing when you start looking through, like, especially in the jump in incidents since 2010. Essentially, it's pretty wild how many more of them there have been.
And you don't know, is it because the exit velocities are faster off the bats that pitchers? It would seem that maybe there's a slight difference there, but it's hard to believe it would be that that much more than it was 50 years ago. The bats are still when the balls are still pretty much the same.
Well, I wonder if it has to do with the batters changing up. I mean, this is obviously wouldn't go back to 2010, but it would make sense at least going forward that with the change in batters trying to affect their launch angle, that might be resulting in more line drives than before, where there was almost kind of the baseball thing. If you want to hit the ball, put the ball on the ground. You know what I mean? People would try and hit those lows, smash it into the ground, and you don't really get that anymore.
So just running through the pitcher names in 2009, Joe Martinez of the Giants. And it was his second major league outing. And a weird thing when I started looking through these names, a lot of rookies, got hit, which I don't really understand why you'd be more prone as a rookie to have that happen. It makes no statistical sense.
The only thing I could think is that for whatever reason, as a rookie, you're more likely to get a guy that isn't as practiced or skilled in avoiding the ball.
I know Juan Nicasio of the Rockies, Brandon McCarthy.
Yeah,
in 2012, that's a little bit more recently. Jay Happ in 13, Aroldis Chapman in 14.
Yeah, he took that one off the face, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And these are just major league pitchers, right? We're not talking about other levels. You don't hear about it at the minor league level very much, or at the college level, or any other level. We just know it because major leaguers get written about.
Mm-hmm.
So Archie Bradley, who I think just took a new deal, he got hit in 15. Matt Shoemaker, also of a new deal.
I remember that was a really bad one. Shoemaker got hit really badly.
And the Dodgers, Justin May in 2019. So almost every year, in the past, 5, you've got an incident, be it in spring training or the regular season, where guys get hit, and no one's trying to sweep it under the rug, but they certainly don't want to talk about it.
And you even go back, like, just a guy getting hit by a baseball can have a career-altering impact. Like, I remember, I think it was Dizzy Dean. He got hit in, like, the foot. And didn't that mess up his throwing motion, which caused, like, other injuries down the line? He couldn't really be the same pitcher that he was, right?
Well, unfortunately, we're talking about headgear. We're not going to put toe gears on.
No. But, like, what you're saying is, like, even the littlest thing, like being struck by a baseball, can have a career-altering impact for a guy. So, like, when you think about, like, what happens then when it's the head area, it can just be even worse.
One of the things that happened before your time was a famous photo on the cover of Sports Illustrated by a hitter getting hit in the eye with a fastball by Jack Hamilton, Tony Conigliaro.
Right, we've talked about him because he was having a good career up until that point, and then he was never the same.
Yep, led the league in home runs and was never the same. So what we're getting to is that we'd love for there to be a movement that something starts now, because as we discussed with Willie, it's going to take 20 years before that could actually going to be comfortable enough for someone to have technology to wear on the mound in a major league game.
Right, and if you start developing it now on your own preemptively, you might have different competing technologies because people can go with what they think might be a better solution. Whereas if we wait until, like we said, there's some kind of more grievous incident, it's just going to be heavy-handed, one top-down solution because we need to do something at that point.
And at the youth levels, which is where we believe it should start, we think that do it before something happens, because what if parents say, "Oh God, this pitcher got hit and killed," or whatever it would be, and not let their kids play baseball, and you're going to lose a lot of kids because parents are afraid of some 11-year-old or a 9-year-old hitting their kid on the mound. I'm overstating.
Yeah, but parents are pulling their kids from football because of the potential injuries. Right. So the last thing you want to do is give them a reason to pull their kids from baseball for the same thing.
So let's get started with this, and hopefully we'll talk more about this. And Willie had some good, thoughts on, how we might sort of further discussion. And so if you'd like to, send us your thoughts on this as well.
We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, at our email or our Twitter feed. So, well, thanks very much for joining us. Interesting subject, and we'll talk more about it.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.
And you can follow us on Twitter at Almost Coop.